Monday. I am here live with Ian at Weinberger.
Hello.
Wherever he is. Hi, Ian. How are you doing?
You're over there. Wait. Oh God. I went to music school. You're that way.
I know which are you. It's like, when you do those Zoom happy hours and then somebody's like, how are you doing? And you don't know they're talking to you because to you they're over here or over. We have lost all direction. We're gonna come out of this in New York and we're gonna be like chicken with our heads, having no idea where we're going.
That's
what's
exactly
going to
right.
happen. So everyone, if you are watching us live, please write in the comments, write some questions for Ian. Ian is the music director of Hamilton on Broadway, a little show you might have heard about. So we're so excited. Ian is here with us. Ian, I don't know if you know this, but my favorite memory of you and was, I don't know if you remember this. We went to eat at a Thai restaurant. And for some reason, I kept dropping, but that was like 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And I kept dropping my fork on the floor like a million times. And you managed to save me a few times. You were like, it's okay. And then by the end, you were like, are you okay there?
I have no memory of this. I remember the Thai restaurant, but the fork incident has left my memory.
This whole time, I'm like, oh my gosh, like Ian probably thinks of me as the fork dropper. I'm glad we cleared that up.
I'm glad we cleared that up too. You can rest assured that I do not think of you as a fork dropper.
So all of that said, everyone, please write your questions for Ian. Any questions related to Hamilton, music, musical theater, life in New York in isolation, because we're both in New York right now. But here's a question we had early on by Ken, who wants to know, what was your growth path? As in, how did you become connected to Hamilton?
Yeah. First of all, hello everybody. Nice to see you. Where be with you, I should suppose. I can't see any of you, but nice to spend the time with you wherever you are in the world. Hope you are staying sane and healthy, and your families are healthy, and passing the time in whatever way you like to. How did I get involved with Hamilton? I had done a very early reading of the show that later became Dear Evan Hansen. I was sort of the associate MD to Alex Lacamoire, who of course is the music supervisor of both shows, Dear Evan Hansen and Hamilton. And so this was like 5.5 years ago that we did like a 1 week reading of this show. And I fell in love with Dear Evan Hansen and obviously loved the score and loved being with those folks. And it was basically the cast that ended up opening it on Broadway, and it's amazing people, amazing show. And the short version is that I had really fell in love with Dear Evan Hansen, and at the same time I knew that Alex was just starting rehearsal for Hamilton at the Public, and I only really had heard about Hamilton. I knew that it was Lin-Miranda's next show and that you couldn't get a ticket to it, and that it was about the Treasury Secretary and it was some hip-hop thing. And the long story, very, very short, is that I kept asking and sort of nudging Alex to see if he needed any extra pair of hands on Dear Evan Hansen. And he sort of, after a while, basically said, no thanks, I think we're all set in Dear Evan Hansen world, but actually we do need somebody else at the Public to help out with Hamilton, and are you available? What are you doing right now? This was about 2 weeks after the show had opened off Broadway. So this was a little more than 5 years ago. It had just opened and it had just announced its Broadway transfer. So I came on board to be basically an additional rehearsal pianist and to be somebody who taught the vocals to the covers, to the ensemble, who all at that time had principal cover tracks. So my first experience with the show was me and an ensemble member one-on-one, going through a principal track and then meeting with somebody else. And so I sort of worked through the ensemble one by one, teaching them these tracks alone. And that was my sort of first interaction with Hamilton at all. I didn't see it for like 3 weeks after that. And I didn't meet most of the principal cast until we started rehearsal for Broadway, because it was really just the ensemble and understudies that I was spending time with. And so cut to a few months later, we started rehearsal for Broadway, the summer of 2015. And I was there again playing rehearsals, and I played most of Tech, which was really really, really valuable. We can talk plenty about that if you'd like. And that was sort of a really big growth opportunity for me to learn the show really well. And then right after opening, we had a lot of understudies to teach and more understudies to teach. And so I was there doing a lot of that. And then I started subbing as a key two player right after opening. And then after that, I started subbing as a conductor. About a year and a half later, I became the associate MD of the Broadway company when Alex, who had originally been the full-time conductor, sort of transitioned into being a music supervisor role. And then I took over as music director about 2 months ago, which means I was doing it for like 5 weeks, 6 weeks before Broadway came to a halt in the midst of all of this. So you're catching me at a time where I was still very much figuring out like what my process is going to be and how I can sort of make the job the best it can be for me, and figuring out what those systems will be. So I'm new in that regard, but I've been with the show about 5 years and change.
Well,
Long
congratulations.
answer.
That is
Thank you, Geraldine.
I mean, that's an amazing like path right there. That's an amazing story, and it's amazing. Congratulations on this new position. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Everyone, we have a lot of you watching live. You have to grant StreamYard access so that we can see the comments. So if you have a question, ask it in the comments. I can ask your question directly to Ian, but make sure that you have permission so that you give us permission so I can see the question. You said you had more to share about the tech process.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, gosh, we can nerd out about all things Hamilton for as long as you like to, but I think like what was I'm the oh, thank you, I appreciate it. Hi everybody.
Maddie said such a great path. Thanks for sharing. So happy for you, Ian.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I don't know who's writing any of these. It just says Facebook user, so I'll check in later on and see who you are. But I thank you. What was
Tech.
I'm the like rare music director who loves tech in general. It's very rare, and I know I'm probably the exception. What I love about it in general is just that I get to like watch a lot of people who are really smart doing what they do really intensely. I just love to watch people work and watch people collaborate. And tech for us, as you all know, is like often the most boring part of our process because it becomes not about us for like a while. And all of a sudden the tech elements have to like sort of take center stage for a while. But I strangely love that because there's no pressure, because we get to sort of just watch and contribute, and I love that stuff. But anyway, Hamilton Tech was really useful for me because like I said, I ended up playing a lot of it. The guy who was my boss at the time, Kurt Crowley, who was the music director before me and at that time was the associate, he sort of said to me, listen, why don't you play most of this? Because I played tech off Broadway. I've done it already. I don't really feel like I need the time on the keyboard, but it would be really useful for you to like get a lot of reps. And we do our tech process with and most of our rehearsal process with a rehearsal percussionist. So I got to like play along with click and play along with beats and get a sense of what the grooves sound like. But what was really useful is because, as you all know, it was in really small chunks. We would play 4 bars and then we'd hold, and we'd play the same 4 bars again, and then we'd hold, and then we'd maybe play 8 bars. It was just really useful to chunk it up that way and to be able to like focus on a lot of little details, which the Hamilton score is chock full of. So to be able to isolate it and rep it and get to do it in situ with vocals and with lights and get to see it, that really helped me learn the show in a big way.
That's awesome. We have a question from Camille who says, hey dude.
Oh, hi Camille, I can see that that's you. Okay, great.
She says, hey dude, can you tell me what you think makes a good music director besides being Ian Weinberger?
Oh gosh, stop it. Oh, thank you. Hi Camille. Camille's one of our rehearsal pianists at the show, and key 2 sub as well, and she's tremendous, and I adore
yes,
her.
Camille.
What makes a good music director? I think, this is worth books and books and books. I think my favorite music directors are really probably the biggest trait that they all share is how collaborative they are, and how open to collaboration they are, and how and this is something that I work toward all the time, but I think about sort of my favorite music directors that I've gotten to work with and work for, and um, if somebody comes to them, if a director or choreographer, or a lighting designer or the composer were to come to them and say, hey, we should do this instead, or I need this to be 4 bars longer, or can we, whatever it might be, their first reaction is never no. The first reaction is always, yeah, tell me more about that, and why is it useful, or what else do you need? And they're sort of like not the first reaction is not to be precious about their work, and to sort of say yes, and how can I serve the piece? And definitely, that's not to say that people will just sort of lie down at the feet of whoever's in front of them, but I think there's something really nice about being able to think about other ways to try to make the piece better. It's a collaborative art form, right? And if we wanted to be solo recital pianists, we could do that, and then we have complete control over exactly what we're doing all the time. But it's not, sometimes we serve at whatever the choreographer needs, or the director needs, or the composer needs. And so the best people who do this, I think, are really, really able to be flexible, not to mention being like tremendously smart at all things, music and otherwise. That doesn't hurt either. I'm still trying to get to a place like that. But I would say that's the number one thing. And then I would also say that, like, it's a leadership role, as we all know. It's a role that involves like being in front of groups, whether that's the actors or leading the pit orchestra or whatever it might be. And so my sort of philosophy of leadership is that you want to make sure that it's enjoyable for people. You want to make sure that people have a good time at work and enjoy doing what they do, and also want to work hard and want to make it right. That is to say that it's not like a taskmaster kind of thing, but it's like, hey, it should sound the way it should sound, and let's all work together to do that. That's sort of the place that I try to come from, is try to like instill some enthusiasm in making it good and making it better.
We have another question here. We don't know your name, but the question is about Ableton. That says, does Hamilton use Ableton on Broadway? I know there's Click, at least on the tour, but curious about the Broadway setup.
Yeah, I'll be answering this question in the absence of my dear friend Scott Wasserman, who's our Ableton programmer, and Scott's a brilliant mind as well. Yes, Hamilton uses lots and lots of Ableton, and we run our Click through Ableton, as well as a few other elements as well. Interestingly, you mentioned the tour, and it's worth sort of highlighting that by and large, the Ableton setup is essentially the same from company to company. That is to say that all the tempos are essentially identical, and all the sort of ins and outs of the Click are more or less identical, with a few little variations. But there's great that allows for a lot of great control over, like, just quality control of knowing that, like, the tempo of Helpless is always whatever it is. You would think I would know that. The tempo of The Room Where It Happens is always 87 beats per minute, always. And we just know that, and now there's no question about it. So the bulk of the purpose of Ableton is, like I say, Click, and then a lot there is some musical element that is run through Ableton. A lot of it is a couple of looped digital effects, and a lot of like synthy things that can't really be played by humans, plus sound effects that are tied to music, gunshots, explosions. It's about a war, a horse noise that's supposed to come on beat too, whatever it might be. And then there's a lot of light cues that are triggered by Ableton when the lights are supposed to be musical in the way that they pop. Those are triggered by Ableton, and all the Ableton in the show is run by the percussionist. And it's sort of his or her gig to start every trigger of the show. And I don't know how many Ableton triggers there are, but there's a lot. Without rambling too much, I'll mention that the clicks, and this all comes from Alex, are really specifically designed to ebb and flow with the show. almost never does a click stay exactly in one tempo all the way from top to bottom. A lot of the time at the ends of the phrase, this is something Alex does in all of his shows. In the last bar of a phrase, let's say the fourth bar of a 4-bar phrase, the click might get a little bit slower, or might actually stop and then restart in the fifth bar, or might even slow down for 2 BPM for the last 2 beats. That comes from like Alex's philosophy that in talking in sentences, we naturally slow down at the end of our sentences. This is worth books and books, but building the click in that way allows it to feel natural. You would never notice it in the audience. We almost don't notice it on the podium or in the band because it feels so organic, and it allows the end of every phrase. And again, it's not every phrase, but it's a lot of phrases or particular things that can stretch with a little bit of extra landing. I think there are 3 songs in the show and only 3 where the tempo stays consistent top to bottom.
That's fascinating info.
Yeah.
I hope you're using this time to write that book. At least one of the many. All right. If you're a book writer out there, please write this book. I want to read it. Here's another question. Hey, Ian, as Q1 and conductor, what is the hardest part of the show for you to play?
The hardest part of the show to play, I would say that's a close tie between What Did I Miss and The Room Where It Happens. Although I think it would have to be What Did I Miss, because The Room Where It Happens, we're really only dealing with like the last third of the song. The first half of it is pretty chill. What Did I Miss is unfortunate because you come out of intermission and there you are, you're like getting your water and you're like hanging out with people, and then you sit down and it's just like whole notes, no problem. And then all of a sudden it's the like boogie woogie left hand thing going on, and like all of this like all of these like crazy jazz licks, which Alex plays so well, and it's so infuriating to me. It's always something I'm chasing. It's always like not as good as I want it to be. Maybe when this is all over, I'll play What Did I Miss better than I used to.
We have a question here from Jose. Hi, Jose, who says,
Hi, Jose.
How much of your marching band background and experience carries over to your Broadway and musical theater work? Go Cats. Ooh, whatever the sign is.
Jose. It's just this. Go Cats. Thank you for asking, Geraldine. That's a really good question. I was a huge marching band nerd. I used to be a drummer. That's what my degree is in percussion performance and music education. And so I spent 7 years as a drumline kid, all through high school and most of college, and loved every second of it. I was a huge marching band nerd. So we can go down a marching band path if we need to. But what marching band did for me is it made me a really good listener. There's so much about marching band is precision and really, really fine detail, and especially on the drum line, where like, especially if you know marching band or if you've been in marching band, you know that like the drum line, especially all the attacks are so precise. You know, the cut of each attack of the drum is so fine. And when there's 9 snare drummers or whatever it might be, or 5 snare drummers or however many, if they're not exactly together, or if the roll is not exactly together, or if the lick is not together, you hear it really clearly because it's not the goal is for it to sound like one unified drum. And so it sort of brought up in me the idea that like we can really pay attention to rhythmic detail and musical detail in an effort to really, really lock in a musical way. That definitely has carried forward into Hamilton, where so much of the precision of landing a downbeat wants to be exactly right, or landing any sort of rhythmic thing. What I don't miss about marching band is carrying a 50-pound drum on my back. Not interested in doing that anymore. But that's sort of the first thing that comes to mind.
Great. We have another question, and then you guys will maybe have time for one other, and that'll be it. This question is, as a new MD joining a show a couple of years into a long run, how do you keep the energy fresh for every show of an 8-show week?
That's the $1 million question. I'm very glad you asked. So like I said, I've been with Hamilton 5 years and change. I know it extraordinarily well. And in many ways, I'm also still learning it. There are things I'm still discovering about it, and things that, things that I didn't notice before, whether that's, oh shit, that's an internal rhyme. Who knew? Never caught that before. Or like, oh, or the way the viola writing goes. Like there's stuff in it always to discover, which I'm loving, which is really useful. But how do you keep it fresh? It's tough because it's an amazing score. It's an amazing show. I'm lucky to be a part of it, and I love being a part of it. And it's amazing music to play every day. Um, and yet, how do I tell anybody that I'm bored in Hamilton? But the truth is, it happens from time to time, and it would for, I think, anybody playing any music every day for X number of years. It happens to everybody. I think for me, if I do it right, those days are as few and as far between, if possible, as possible. I think like there are days when you simply when I simply feel like I wonder what I'm going to have for dinner, and I really am excited to not play this song again for the rest of the day. That happens. And like I think for a long time I was getting really down on myself about that feeling, about like maybe I'm doing it wrong. But I think I finally learned, in the last year or so, to sort of be okay with that and know that usually, almost always, when I come back the next day, I'm excited to be there again. As I think most people working on long runs would probably, hopefully, agree with. For me, the challenge is about like really doing my best to clue into the show that's in front of me, and not thinking about tomorrow's show, and not thinking about last night's show, and trying to sort of like make the best out of the musical moment that's in front of me, and trying to sort of be as present for that as possible. Lynn says something a lot that I always sort of refer back to in my brain. He always likes to say that it is out of all the people in the audience, it is someone's first Broadway show, and it's also someone's last Broadway show, which is heavy duty, but it's it makes you sit forward in your seat if you think of it that way, and I try to be really careful about that.
Wow, that's a great way to think about it, for sure. We have a question here from Ethan. Hi, Ethan. He asks, can you talk about the dance of balancing working on a long-term contract gig like Hamilton while still keeping a presence in the industry by working on other projects?
Hi, Ethan. I miss you. That's also a very good question. I am still finding my way in that, I think, a little bit, especially now that I've sort of changed roles at Hamilton. I think this will be a very interesting question to also ask once our industry sort of restarts on the other side of the moment that we're in. I don't think any of us know what that's going to look like. It is definitely a dance. I'm glad you used the word dance, because that's exactly what it feels like, is that, Hamilton for me always wants to be my priority. And I owe the show that, and I can't ever feel like Hamilton is on the back burner while I'm doing something else. Although, as Ethan well knows, because we just worked together not long ago in Chicago, that like there are times when I pick up another gig and have to give that my focus for a little bit of time. And when that happens, then it's about like checking in on Hamilton and just like being in touch with stage management, or with my associate, or with my boss when I used to be the associate, and checking to make sure that like all things are okay, and hey, how did the rehearsal go with so and so, or are they ready to go on yet, or whatever it might be. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that there's the dance is about making sure that any side projects that I'm taking, whether it's another show out of the city, or a concert with someone, or whatever it might be, that it's the right gig and something that I'm excited about, and something that I can afford to like devote some brain space to, without taking away too much from my Hamilton duties. And I also try to space them out. Ethan and I just did this show together in Chicago, which opened at the end of February. I couldn't turn around and start another show out of town like 2 weeks later, assuming we were all really at work and the industry was normal during this time. Like it would be now a few months of me being at Hamilton to like make sure that that's okay and like spend some good time there, and before I felt comfortable like going out of town again. There's no I'm still looking for a way clearly to distill this into like a couple of sentences, but I think like it's a very case by case scenario, and I'm still finding out the best way to do that.
Yeah. And before we say goodbye, how are you using this time right now? What are you up to?
What am I up to? It's so weird. Like a friend of mine said to me yesterday, like, I don't know what I'm doing, he said, but I feel like I'm so busy, which is very strange. What's cool is I'm very much enjoying the downtime, actually, and I'm lucky to be healthy and lucky my family's healthy, and I'm doing like a couple things that I never get to do in my real life. I'm like cooking a lot, and I'm like binging some TV and kind of like allowing myself to be okay about that. I'm doing a small amount of work. I have a couple of assorted projects that I had been saying to myself I will get to sometime, and now this is sometime, and that's been great. I'm in the middle, right before we started, I was in the middle of some Hamilton PV updates, because we keep finding mistakes and we keep finding like we keep actually revising some things, and so like got a lot of updates to do for that. I'm taking Scott Wasserman's Ableton class, which has been amazing. And I'm not playing a lot. I'm really playing only like a little bit for fun. I have this wrist injury and I'm enjoying the like time off or not playing. So that's kind of been a nice welcome change.
You mentioned Saturday nights on Broadway.
Oh yeah, this is so dumb, so silly, but yes, thank you for reminding me. We do these videos when we're at the show, when the show is normal. Yes, Scott Wasserman, I'm taking Ableton classes from a very handsome instructor. The good work. When the show is normal, Saturday night on Broadway is a phrase that has been tossed around on Broadway shows for decades. That the stage manager will say it's Saturday night on Broadway when it is Saturday night. Kurt Crowley, my old boss, and I used to. This started actually back in the Heights, a tradition of doing a little musical thing on Saturday nights to commemorate the Saturday night thing, and that has sort of evolved and taken on a life of its own. So now Kurt, my old boss, and I are spending our downtime in this social distancing, getting rather extravagant with our video editing skills, which is to say his video editing skills. He's doing it all.
Where can we watch these? They sound amazing.
Oh gosh, it's outrageous. Find my Instagram is the place to look.
All right.
Which is quite simply, it's Ianstagram, like not Instagram, but Ianstagram I am. Like Love Sam it. I am. But Ianstagram I am. Ianstagram was taken. It's a whole thing. Anyway, well, I'm not explaining this well, but it's a delight.
It sounds amazing. I think there's now an aura of mystery around it, so we'll all make sure to come check it out. Thank you for taking the time to cheer us on and give us some musical talk so we can think about what we love. Thank you for being with us, Ian. Everyone, thank you for all the great questions. Thank you for tuning in live.
Thank you for the questions. I'm sorry I didn't get to more of them, but I'll see what I can do to like pop on and say hello. But thank you for the questions, and thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, and thanks everyone. Remember, we have a class coming up on vocal arranging taught by Brian Perry, who was the music director of Wicked for 5 years, who is the music supervisor of Almost Famous, and the music director of the Alanis Morissette Broadway show Jagged Little Pill. So you don't want to miss it. It starts on this Wednesday in 2 days. So
Brian is a dream. He's a great guy, brilliant musician.
And he's so sweet. His heart is amazing. And that's always what we're about in this group. It's all about the heart. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Bye, everyone.